Hello and welcome. It is Canvas the Niger-Delta Roundtable, where I discuss the future of the Niger-Delta region blessed with enormous resources. Every week, we give time to reflecting on topics relevant to the progressive development of the Niger-Delta and her people, and today is no different. We're here to focus once again on how to take this region to a more promising future. And the program Canvas the Niger-Delta Roundtable is sponsored by the operator of the NNPC, SPDC, Total Energies Active Joint Venture, the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, headquartered in Port Harcourt. Thank you for joining. I'm Adedayo Ilushakin. And the topic on this edition of Canvas is pipelines for progress. Oil pipelines, the silent arteries of our modern economy, play a pivotal role in shaping the economic landscape. They are the lifelines that connect the oil-rich regions to energy-hungry markets, ensuring a steady flow of this black gold. Now, the importance of oil pipelines cannot be overstated. They facilitate the efficient transportation of crude oil and petroleum products across vast distances, contributing to energy security and economic stability. They are the unsung heroes that power our industries, fuel our cars, light up our homes. But the story doesn't end there. The construction, maintenance and operations of these pipelines generate countless jobs, stimulating economic growth. They also contribute significantly to government revenues through taxes and royalties. However, like all things, they come with their own set of challenges: environmental concerns, geopolitical tensions, infrastructure issues are just a few of the hurdles in their path. So, join us as we explore the intricate world of oil pipelines, understand their economic significance, and discuss challenges they face. Again, our topic on Canvas is pipelines for progress, and my guest is engineer John Okoje. John Okoje is a member of the Nigerian Society of Engineers with extensive experience in oil and gas pipeline design and installation, maintenance and operations, and right-of-way asset management. He is team lead pipeline right-of-way and encroachment with SPDC. John Okoje, good day to you and welcome to Canvas on Air.
Thank you, Daya.
It's always a pleasure to have you on the show, John.
It's always my pleasure to be with you here.
Great, so let's get right to it then. So let's imagine this, hypothetical scenario, or not so hypothetical actually, what I'm about to describe. So let's say there's an expression, there's Gen Z. Let's say I'm Gen Z and I've grown up, or I was born not long ago and I've grown up, even if I live in a city, maybe I get to go home to the countryside or the village every now and then, and I see pipelines crisscrossing, maybe even the backyard, or I've had conversations ongoing about pipelines and all of that. And I didn't know how they came to be there. So let's start on that note. These pipelines, which we're discussing today, how did they get to be there in the first place?
Okay, thank you, Dario. So the pipelines didn't just grow up in the neighborhoods of the Niger-Delta or wherever you may find them. So at a certain point, there was oil exploration and production initiated in the Niger-Delta, and that had to be supported by these pipelines. So facilities where oil was drilled and produced needed to have evacuation paths for the oil to get from point A to point B, from the flow stations to the terminals, for instance. And these pipelines basically connect these facilities. So typically you would design and construct a pipeline. I mean, stringing joints of pipelines, bringing them, welding them together across whatever terrain, land or swamp, and having those terminate at a particular location, like a terminal. So that's just a straight line, for instance, from a flow station to a terminal. It gets a bit more complex when you now have multiple flow stations, where you now have different export terminals, and you now have this in a network of pipelines. Yes.
Now, it might seem like Lego bricks, but it seems a lot more complex than Lego bricks.
Well, you can start from the basics, right? So you can piece up your Lego in a straight line, but you could also add another leg to the straight line, and on and on and on. So having to understand that network, having to be able to manage that network, it's your day-to-day operations.
It sounds like a lot of work, and I suppose might require or must require a great deal of expertise.
Great deal of expertise. Yes, there are certain aspects of managing the pipelines that require certain proprietary technologies and things like that. But I think what is most important is that you have a basic understanding and vision of what you want to achieve, and then get all the resources to be able to achieve that optimum goal.
Now, I get how drilling for oil is good for any economy. You sell the oil, you make money from it, just like anything else. It's like this glass and this water in here. Someone produced the water and packaged it and sells it and makes a profit from it. And I think the same can be said for oil as well. And in so saying, I do get how selling the oil and the revenue can or does contribute to economic growth of the Niger-Delta, for example, Nigeria as a whole, or any country for that matter that deals in oil. But how about the pipelines? How exactly do the pipelines contribute to economic growth, say, the Niger-Delta?
So I think more and more, so if you look at the pipeline as a transportation mode, right? So instead of trucking, instead of barging all that production every time from a flow station to your export location or terminal, which involves, so if you are trucking, for instance, involves a lot of trucks that will be on the road, right? It's not efficient to do that. But with the pipeline, you have continuous flow, right, from point A to point B, unrestricted, with less hazards, with less risk, right? So transportation in itself is a major risk, because you have to truck, and then you are now exposing those trucks and the public to a lot of potential hazards or risks that can happen. So in terms of efficiency, more volumes you are able to transport more volumes from point A to point B. Also devoid of any of those risks that you would face with either land transportation or marine transportation. So that, I think that is where the pipelines play a significant role in terms of efficiency.
So it helps us cut costs and limit exposure, I suppose?
You cut costs, you reduce the exposure to both the trucks themselves, that's the operator, and even the public, right? So you can imagine having, say, 1,000 trucks, for instance, every day from point A to point B with such flammable liquids in them. I mean, a lot of things happen, right?
Would we actually need up to 1,000 trucks a day?
So I just give that as an instance. So depending on the volume you're interested in moving from point A to point B, you could even do more. Wow. And that would also largely impinge on your infrastructure, your road infrastructure, for instance. Having to repeatedly have such heavy trucks go on the road. Yeah. So it could also increase your marine traffic as well. So barges are used as well. Those are all options of moving your hydrocarbon from A to B.
Construction of any kind does have environmental implications, whether you're building roads or you're building a house, whatever it is. And in the case of pipelines, they are constructed as well, I suppose.
Yes.
So speaking of environmental implications, what are the environmental implications of constructing and operating these pipelines?
Environmental implications really have to do with managing your construction activities, right? First of all, you have to acquire the right of ways that you are going to install this and make sure that they are free from all encumbrances, away from. So you acquire a certain stretch or strip of right of way to lay these pipelines. And during that construction, yes, you have to clear up and excavate, string the pipelines, weld them, and then you bury them. So most of the time, the pipelines that go for longer distances, especially the export pipelines, are buried, right? The ones that you see on the surface most of the time are within a particular field for short distances. So you basically have to construct these things in such a manner that you minimize the social health impact and environmental impact on the location where you are constructing the pipelines across. Yeah. So just like any other project, a social impact, environmental impact assessment is done, and then you can mitigate issues that may impact the environment and the society or location where you're constructing the pipelines.
Oh, you mentioned the issues, to mitigate the issues. We'll come to the issues in a moment. We'll come to that shortly.
Right.
But you used an expression a while ago, which I'd like for you to elaborate on.
Okay.
Right of way. What does that mean?
Okay, a right of way is a strip of land, I would say, that goes from point A to point B, where you want the pipelines to go from and to go to, right? So that right of way is acquired and leased from the various communities that are within that stretch of acquisition that you have made. So there are licenses that are also acquired in that. So applications are made to the regulators, licenses are acquired for you to be able to install the pipeline. Acquisitions are made from the communities. So it's a whole lot of stakeholder engagements, I would say, for you to be able to acquire some of these things and then get permission to be able to lay the pipelines across this acquired right-of-ways.
So, in spite of the acquisition of this right-of-ways, and I suspect that the right-of-ways are made public and properly marked, I suspect so, do we have encroachment? But because it seems that we do, actually. I know it seems like I'm answering the question as well, but I'd like for you to elaborate on that, if you will. I remember quite recently, it was on the news, in one of the Niger-Delta states, there was a full-blood market, yes. a thriving market, by the way, on a pipeline right-of-way, and there had to be engagements with the state government in that Niger-Delta state, and then the governor ordered that the market people be dislodged and moved to a different location. So how big a problem is that, these encroachments, and do they happen often?
So how big a problem? It is a problem. How big a problem would be, I don't think it's, right now, it depends on the operator, really. So each operator has to manage their own right-of-ways, right? So I can relate to that particular instance where there was a market thriving on top of pipelines that were carrying gas and carrying oil. So multiple pipelines, actually. And that is where the urgency came to remove those people that were trading on the right-of-way, just so that you mitigate any occurrence, because these are high-pressure pipelines carrying oil and gas. And if there is any leak within that section, you can imagine, and there is a point of ignition, you could have fatalities, especially in such proximity. So that's why it's important to remove the encroachment. Now, the encroachment problem, so a lot of these pipelines had been constructed years ago, right? So where these pipelines had been constructed in the very remote areas. Urbanization have met them now. So as the urbanization happens, you have to now create proper mitigations to make sure that you stay away from the acquisitions of those right-of-ways. But as you know, a lot of more people don't take procedures seriously, and then you have a few trying to encroach, whether knowingly or unknowingly. They are trying to acquire more land for whatever purposes they need it for. So, and that's where the monitoring of the right-of-way is coming. So you can pick up these encroachments and be able to advise people to stay away.
Now, earlier on, when you were talking about the environmental impact of the construction of the pipelines, you mentioned environmental impact assessments are done to mitigate issues that could arise from laying those pipelines. What are those issues that we're trying to mitigate against, or mitigate rather?
Yeah, so it could be depending on the sensitivity that has been identified in the area. So there are certain areas, for instance, where you could have forest reserves, for instance, that would be accommodating certain species, right? You could also have areas where you do not want noise to happen. So heavy machineries that are deployed during the construction can actually create an impact on the habitat where you are walking across, right? Because remember that this right-of-ways is going to go from, it's going to navigate through different terrains, through different kind of habitat, right? And you want to make sure that whatever you do within that construction period does not negatively impact, or as much as possible is minimized, doesn't impact the existing habitat.
Let's go back to the issue of encroachment. Whilst, urbanization, people are building, it's construction going on, or businesses simply spring up, such as markets, as happened in the example I gave a while ago, which you're familiar with. Are there other forms of encroachment? And I'm speaking specifically to, would this constitute an encroachment? We have cases of economic sabotage where people go to break up these pipelines because they want to siphon or steal petroleum products. Would that constitute encroachment? And how big of an issue is that as well?
So that I would say is pure sabotage because of the intent to destroy or to destroy or to steal. So those are criminal activities, really. Encroachment really is when you inadvertently take up part of the acquired right-of-way for a building, for a stall, for your own use, right? Without necessarily immediately harming the pipeline itself. However, continued stay may expose those that are inhabiting that vicinity to be exposed to some of the hazards, of oil and gas, hydrocarbons. So, because you want to make sure that people stay away as much as possible, you want to remove them immediately from that piece of acquisition, that right-of-way section, right? So it's completely different from when somebody maliciously comes to dig up your pipeline and do a hacksaw cut on it, because that one is clear sabotage, right? Or even steal the...
We'll move on from encroachment. We're not going to be stuck here forever. but I've heard some really bizarre stories about encroachment, now not stealing, And I mean, it's your field, so you can. I'm sure you can speak more to this. But I've heard that there are persons who have built, who live over pipelines, and when the pipelines are active, they can hear from their living rooms or their bedrooms, they can hear products moving in those pipelines. Does that really happen?
Okay, hearing product move, I don't know how much acoustic machinery they have to be able to hear that. But yeah, so we've seen cases where people have been uncomfortably too close to pipelines. So when we say that, it means that in the event that a leak occurs, right? All of these are man-made, right? In the event that a leak occurs, you will be within the immediate vicinity of that leak. And that leak could be an explosion as well. So an oil leak or a gas leak could as well come with an explosion or fire. And that is where the risk issue is about living too close to these pipelines, right? So to be on top of it, by that encroachment, it means that you have come onto the right of way to build your house. And that is not...
Whilst doing research for this conversation, I did find out that oil pipelines are set to enhance energy security. How exactly do they do that? And I ask in the face of, I mean, we're discussing incidents of encroachment now, and we've also touched on even pure sabotage and stealing, and that happens. It's real. Yes. So how then do the pipelines enhance energy security?
So energy security in terms of making sure that you have unfettered, flow of oil or gas, from where you produce it to where you export or sell it, right? So that whole cycle, or that whole life cycle, just guarantees the fact that your energy source is available to you where you want to have it sold, and that continuous cycle goes on. So maintenance operations of existing pipelines would entail that these pipeline right-of-ways are monitored to make sure that they don't have such encumbrances such as the encroachments.
Oh, you talked about maintenance. You just mentioned maintenance now, and takes us to the next question. Of course, putting up such complex infrastructure, as with any other infrastructure for that matter, I suppose, especially one with such complexity, would require some maintenance, maybe a great deal of maintenance as well. How does that go normally, maintaining the pipelines, and what challenges are faced in the maintenance of these pipelines?
Okay, so maintaining the pipelines, aside of repairs arising from third-party incursions like theft and things like that, the routine maintenance just requires that you first of all inspect the pipelines, right, to make sure that these pipelines have what we call residual wall thickness of the pipe that will continue to hold the pressures in which you operate them. And then it requires that you also do some remedial work where you do find that there are integrity issues with the pipeline, and to fix the pipelines and make sure that they continue to operate to the required pressure volume limits that you have set, right? So there are challenges, but I don't think the challenges we face in terms of maintenance in the industry are not as much as we suffer from the third-party incursions that we have. So technology exists to be able to maintain the pipelines, and once you are able to plan those maintenance properly, then you won't really have an issue, because some of them maintenance actions would require that you shut down the pipelines periodically to carry out some of this maintenance, I would say.
And are there any challenges with that, with ensuring that the maintenance is carried out and as that point due?
Except in very extraneous circumstances, would I say those could be challenges. Not. I wouldn't call them challenges, but I will say they are more or less forward planning that you need to do to be able, because some of these pipelines will need to be shut down, right? So it's not a challenge. It's about planning for your work to be done as and when due.
And talking about planning, you talked about ensuring that steps being taken as part of maintenance to ensure the safety and integrity of the pipelines. In fact, you were talking about the thickness, I think?
Wall thickness, yes,
okay,
of
the
the steel,
pipelines,
yes.
a while ago. Could you elaborate on that? What measures or steps are taken to ensure the safety and integrity of these pipelines?
Okay. So from time to time, an operator is required to inspect the pipelines, just to make sure that, and there are tools for that, and there are processes for that. So you inspect the pipelines, and where you do see that there are integrity issues with the pipelines, maybe reducing wall thicknesses and things like that, then you set out to carry out remedial actions on them, meaning that you could increase the wall thickness around those places where it's losing wall thickness. You could do sectional replacements where maybe you find that there are defects and things like that, just to reinstate the pipeline back to its intended integrity.
And how serious does Shell take this maintenance culture, if you will?
It's very important, because you want to be able to, if you don't maintain the pipeline as you should, then you cannot operate it to the required volumes and pressures, which will also then affect your overall utilization of the pipeline, right?
So it's in the interest of the business to ensure the pipelines are actually in order?
Absolutely, because then you can continue to safely utilize them.
It is Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, brought to you by SPDC. We are discussing pipelines for progress. Pipelines out there, they serve a purpose actually, and they are powering our lives. My guest is John Okoje. We have to go for a break. We'll return in a moment. Do please stay with us.
Our yellow and black markers indicate pipeline and flow line right-of-way boundaries. Your activity could impact on the buried high-pressure hydrocarbon pipelines and flow lines, leading to possible leaks and explosion. Please keep off. Do not engage in sand mining or any form of excavation, pipeline vandalism, oil theft and bush burning within pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Do not farm, trade or locate any business on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. It is against the law to apportion land, sell or build on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Maintain a setback distance of at least 30 meters or about 100 feet from the right-of-way boundaries always. We care for your safety and that of the environment.
This message is brought to you by the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, SPDC, operator of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited, Total Energies and Ajib Joint Venture.
And welcome back. It is Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, brought to you by SPDC. John Okoje is my guest. Engineer John Okoje, his lead pipeline right-of-way and encroachment with SPDC. Johnny, welcome again.
Thank you, Dad.
We're discussing pipelines for progress in the Niger-Delta region and elsewhere where oil has been traded. It's not uncommon to see pipelines ferrying hydrocarbons crisscrossing a place. How exactly does pipelines get there? What purposes do they serve? How critical are they to energy security and even economic security as well? These are other details we're discussing right now. Ever so often, John, conversations are stirred up regarding these pipelines, even to the point of raising tensions, if you will. How do geopolitical tensions, as we often experience here in Nigeria and in the Niger-Delta region, how do these tensions impact the operations of these pipelines?
Maybe tensions such as agitations and
Yeah,
things
so
like that.
of whatever kind,
Yeah,
especially
so,
those, yeah.
Okay, so again, I think, thank you for that. It's, in my opinion, more about stakeholder management, right? So you have different stakeholders in the oil and gas industry, right? From the communities where you have these oil-bearing facilities are installed, or they crisscross in certain communities. You also have the regulators themselves who guide the operations and everything about the oil and gas industry, the government as well. You have the public as also stakeholders. So a lot of times, depending on what the prevailing economic, social issue is, which is also maybe related to oil and gas operations, some of these things impact on the pipeline itself, in the sense that sometimes some communities may take it out on the pipeline by going to sabotage hacksaw drill holes and things like that, because they want to be heard. They feel they don't have the attention of either the operator or government, and they take out their anger on the pipelines. This is what we have seen over time. But that is basically attention seeking, and that really happens when you probably don't have that proactive engagement of your stakeholders, or you've lost somebody in that whole conversation, and somebody's aggrieved and things like that. It's not the best way to go about resolving conflicts, because attacking the pipelines only lead to environmental pollution, right? Even though it's going to be cleaned up, but there is already a pollution that has happened. We have to recover from that, and on and on. So largely, I would say that stakeholder management is very important in proactively managing those kind of instances. Yes, you can have one or two persons that may still be, that may not be reached, but I think more and more educating the public to be able to speak up and come into conversations about whatever they are aggrieved by usually helps.
When stakeholders in the communities, maybe for, like you described, attention-seeking purposes, make these incursions and break into the pipelines or express their anger or take out their anger on the pipelines,
yes.
Or I know they're different, or as in the other case, when we have people who are just plain saboteurs who are just trying to steal the oil anyway. When these incidents happen, what is the impact on the communities where these things happen, physically, socially, and even economically as well?
So in the past, you could get direct impact in terms of environmental pollution. So the operator still needs to go about having to clean up and remediate the environment, making sure that whatever has spilled into the environment is removed and the whole area reinstated. But that in itself has already polluted, right, your environment. So you are now catching up on cleaning up the environment. The other aspect you talked about, social. I cannot say I've done studies, but indeed, some of these things also have social effects in the environment. So I think largely it's to make sure that we prevent these things from happening rather than recovering from them.
How about the economy? Does it affect the economy?
The local economy?
Local and even the national economy.
So national economy, yes, because every time you have a spill, for instance, you would have to shut down your production, and that goes also to impact your overall production and earnings, as it were. Yes, so nationally, yes. But in the case of theft, right, in the theft, and especially where you also have artisanal refineries, right, there is a larger impact. So where you have the illegal artisanal refinery installed, so you have both environmental and then you have also social issues arising from that. You create a market locally, right, that tends to thrive on that criminality, and that raises a false sense of economic empowerment from illegal activities, and then it just goes down that path. So that has its own negative consequences, where criminals within the society now tend to perpetrate themselves upon the locals, because they have, if you like, money to spend from their illegal activities, right? And then, of course, the theft also creates a whole new chain of people stealing crude, people buying stolen products, and all of those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And beyond the national economy, I would dare say even the local economy is impacted as well. I mean, there are obligations that the operators have to the local economies or the host communities where they operate. And if production is hampered or limited, inevitably, invariably, contributions economically to those communities will be impacted as well.
So that is what these HCDTs, so the HCDT is part of the PIA that just came into effect, right? So operators have to set up these HCDTs, and that whole supply chain, now that whole life cycle of you get what you get, you are a stakeholder of what is produced through your community, and all of that now comes to play. So in the current reality, it is in the best interest of the communities to get involved in making sure that they secure oil and gas facilities, yes, so that their earnings, which are tied to the production and operations of oil and gas, are secured, or else they continue to lose on both sides, both on the environmental, coming from leaks and things, and from the economic point of view.
Now, the oil and gas industry is that it is the industry, but I suppose that even within that you have other sub-industries as well. And maybe one could even say that the oil pipelines is some kind of an industry in and of itself, with no doubt immense benefits and attendant challenges as well. But how does the oil pipeline industry, if I may call it that, contribute to employment generation? Because job creation, employment is a very big issue in our climate, in the country, and even the Niger-Delta for that matter. Do these pipelines help in mitigating that issue as well?
So I would say I have the statistics of how much the oil and gas pipeline industry contributes to employment and things like that. But when you look at the different aspects of oil service providers, right, to the oil and gas industry. So there are, if you like, certain aspects, for instance, construction. So pipeline construction in itself, it's a whole industry of its own, right? So you have people who are specialized in construction, design as well. So that's where we start from. So you have engineers who do all the engineering, and then you go into construction as well. So all of these are different areas where people can find usefulness and utilize their skills and provide their services towards the entire oil and gas pipelines. So engineering design is an aspect of its own, is a whole career path of its own. Construction itself is a whole career path, right? You have certain equipment, you have certain skills that are required there, welding, fitting, and all sorts. The maintenance and operations of existing pipelines is a whole industry of its own with certain skills, because you go from asset management of those pipelines, integrity management, inspections, cathodic protection, all of those kind of things. They are all within that maintenance and operations. Yeah. So including the managing the right of ways and things like that. So I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to find usefulness with different kind of skills in the oil and gas pipeline industry, really,
So,
all across.
so more pipelines then?
More work for people to get involved in, actually.
And that means for there to be more pipelines, it means that there are going to be more investments in the pipelines, which means that we can't be breaking into the pipelines and
That are existing.
sabotaging or breaking them.
Yes. So yes, there are a lot of opportunities existing. So especially now that we're trying to, reduce emissions, right? So you even have more gas pipelines that are going to be coming into the play.
You show that though, because that takes us to the next aspect of this conversation. Renewable energy or alternative sources of energy is a rife conversation now, not just in the Niger-Delta or in Nigeria, but even globally, for that matter. And SPDC Shell particularly is in the forefront, is leading that conversation as well, has a net zero goal also. What are the future prospects? We just agreed now that more pipelines mean more work for people, means more engagements, means a bigger economy, both at the local level and even at the national level as well. And those are all good things. But with the industry, the energy industry, turning more towards renewable energy sources, what are the future prospects of the oil and gas pipeline industry?
So if I look into the crystal ball, on the short term, I don't think much would change. Short term, maybe next 10, 15 years, right? But there will be more. So when I say much would change, not negatively in terms of continuing where we are now. Rather, you will have more pipelines coming up. Why do I say that? Because more and more you want to reduce emissions, right? And part of reducing emissions will mean that you have to cut down on your flaring, for instance. In reducing flaring and continuing production, you have to pipe that gas that you will typically flare, right? Stabilize it and utilize it as gas. And those gas must be transported to export terminals for domestic gas use as well, right? So in the short term, you could have an upsurge in that. In the medium term is where you now have to start obeying regulations and restrictions, especially to obey net zero aspirations, right? But when it comes to renewable energy, you would also now have other aspects, for instance, where you need to pipe gas. For instance, renewable energy such as waste, managing waste, or recycling waste. So you have large waste dumps where you can get gas, usable gas from. Those gas also need to be piped at some point from where all that waste is being managed and recycled to where it is utilized as well. So again, even in the renewables, even though it is to a smaller extent, you still have pipings and things coming in as well.
So pipes are key. The pipelines are very important.
Pipes were key. So interestingly, it will surprise you to know that in certain countries, and you could go research this if you want, milk, for instance, can be piped. I'm just saying. So, like I said, it's a form of transportation of fluids, really, right? So if you have large volumes to transport on a constant basis, then piping or putting up a pipeline is your best bet. It's just that there will be different standards that you have to now operate in, materials that are used to construct those kind of things and all of that.
So as citizens and as a people generally, who may not be in the employ of Shell or any other IOC or not in the oil and gas
That
industry at
transporting
all,
milk pipelines.
what roles do we have to play, if we have any roles at all, to play in ensuring that this industry, the oil and gas pipelines industry, is a thriving one, so that we can have more investments in them to pipe all kinds of things, including maybe someday in the Niger-Delta milk as well, to ensure economic growth at the local level, at national level, ensure that we also get jobs as well, maybe even laying some of these pipes and maintaining them.
Yeah, so I think from where we are now, I think we can start from, first of all, just making sure that we properly secure the operations that's for the pipelines, yeah? And that would mean that the integrity of the pipelines continue to remain intact, meaning that you have to continue your monitoring, your inspections, and your remedial works on the pipelines. That also entails managing third-party interferences on your pipelines from whatever risks that are existing right now, especially crude theft. And then that also goes into making sure that in terms of the net zero aspirations, you are able to also construct new pipelines to such standards that will continue to mitigate the impact of the kind of risk that we see today, right? So that you can preclude third-party interference, for instance, or establish or construct the pipelines in such a way that they can be impacted by some of the risks that we see today.
Government, no doubt, is key to all of this.
Absolutely.
I mean, the players, the operators, even the people themselves, don't operate in a vacuum. They're not lords unto themselves. What roles do the government policies and regulations play in ensuring that we have a smooth running of things in the oil pipeline industry?
So I think it's about enforcing the regulations, enforcing the persecution of criminals, creating awareness among the public about some of these things. And basically, I think just making sure that, because it's not just about the operator has to work in such an environment that is enabling, right, to be. So if you have pipelines that more than anything else are not available because they continue to have third-party impacts on them, then you cannot meet the aspiration of the total production that would make economic sense and uplift the people, right? So that's one part of it. The other part is where the regulators also guide and help to create that narrative about just making sure that the operators do what they're supposed to do as well. So again, it's about guiding, understanding, and helping to co-create solutions of maybe technical problems, or just making sure that some of the the challenges that the operators face, they can overcome them.
Maybe my last question.
And then, of course, the issues about awareness generally, really, I think it's everybody's business, really, where you try to manage some of these risks and the challenges in the industry, really.
I think it's critical to ask you this question as well before we wrap this up. So whenever we do have cases of interference or the smooth running of the pipelines, what is the response to dealing with that?
For instance,
when we have interferences, maybe
Okay.
sabotage or interference of whatever
So,
kind,
yeah.
what is the response to
so
that?
a typical interference would create a spill, for instance. Whether it's sabotage or theft, it always ends up in the fact that there is a spill, there's a leak. And that interference leads to the fact that we have to shut down the pipelines, and they are not going to be available within that period that they are shut down, right? And I think that's the correlation. So any interference at all shuts down the pipeline. It's not available for production, and then we have to recover. So there's a cost of having to repair and recover, and then there's the loss of production. All of these are associated costs.
What is the response of the operator to that?
So the response of the operator
How
is
do you
that
deal with it? How do you handle it?
so the operator is involved in, first of all, joining the operator. Regulator joins the operator in, first of all, identifying what the cause of that particular issue is, right? Through what we call a JIV, Joint Investigation Visit, where both the regulators, the operator, the community, police, and all are going to go to that particular point of incident to view and understand what the cause of that leak is, right? So they are still involved all through the entire cycle of interventions and response.
But at the end of the day, pipelines are good. They power our homes, they power our lives, they power the economy,
Absolutely.
and we need more of them.
Absolutely, Dio. We would need more of them, I think, in some years to come.
Who knows? They might even start moving milk for us.
Who knows if you have enough to transport.
And that's it for this edition of Converse in Niger-Delta Roundtable. Thank you very much for joining us. We have discussed pipelines of progress, pipelines, the oil and gas pipelines in the Niger-Delta region and even elsewhere. As we say in Shell, are powering lives. That's what they're doing. And my guest has been lead pipeline right over and encroachment with SPDC, Engineer John Okoje. John, it's been a pleasure having you here.
Thank you. Always a pleasure, Dio.
And thank you for joining us as well. I'm Adedare Elishakin. Do join us for another edition as soon as we drop the next one. Do have yourselves a wonderful time.